inspiring people across the planet to be a little kinder and a little more gentle with each other, delivering inspirational TV, one story at a time, from my lounge to yours. I'm your host, Toni Lontis. And good afternoon, Australia. Good evening, America. You're live listening to Toni Lontis on Everyday Business. And I'm particularly excited today to get to talk to my wonderful co-hosts about some technology. But just before I do, just a reminder that you can hear us live streaming into LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube, where my wonderful VA, Paolo, is waiting to send you any messages and reply to any of your questions as we go along live. If you need to find out about my co-host today, all of their information is on the website, radiotoni.com, where we'd love you to jump on and connect with our individual co-hosts each week. So today we're going to be talking about tech developers and app producers, Briony Schadegg and Dave Schettini. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correct, but I'm going to get Briony to introduce Dave in a moment. Now, Briony comes from a background of policing, believe it or not, where she has 15 years of experience in risk management, team management, leadership, investigation, crime prevention, project and policy development, community engagement, public safety, and mentoring. She also has 7 years experience in business management. She periodically volunteers in aiding marine research, and she has a Bachelor of Business Management, which is current. During her time as a police officer, she lived the experience of dealing with trauma and challenges to our well-being, all things that I love to talk about. Together with her team, Ben Fink, Danny Connery, and Joseph Cassar, she founded HCI Insights, an Australian developed and owned company based in South Australia. Their mission is to empower users and organisations to positively and actively manage their well-being for improved ability to meet positive individual and organisational goals. I want to start the interview with a quote, which I love, from Briony, and it says, "The standard you walk past is the standard you accept." It's all about having a positive social impact and not accepting the status quo and striving to leave the world a better place than when we came into it. Welcome to Radio Toni, Briony and Dave. Briony, to you first. I'd love you to introduce your co-host Dave to us today, and then I'm going to come back and talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us today, Toni. Myself and Dave are super excited to be here and have this conversation with you. Dave is one of our executive team members on Frank. He's actually part of Svelte Studios, which is our partner digital agency. They're also Australian-based, based here in Adelaide. They're South Australian owned and operated. And Dave's been absolutely crucial with the development of Frank. So Dave has a Bachelor of Cognitive Science, and he's just been putting a lot of this together for us. He's great because he understands the technology and the cognitive science aspects of it and how to blend them together. So he's taken all my thoughts, and he and the rest of the team have been able to materialize it into what we call Frank.
We're going to get to Frank in a moment, but before we do, Briony, I wanted to talk about the trauma surrounding policing and how that changed the way you thought about well-being and how we keep both our police, nurses and vital services healthy and well, and how all of that played into your thoughts around developing this amazing app.
Yeah, so obviously being from a policing background, I've had that frontline experience, and I know that trauma that you develop or go through every day, how it can build up on you, how it can be instantaneous, and how there's a lot of challenges in dealing with it. There's still a lot of stigma around dealing with mental health issues and wellbeing issues. When you go to the academy, at least when I went through, which was a long time ago now, they prepare you for to be a police officer by teaching you the legislation. They prepare you for what you're going to encounter on the street. Something that's really difficult to prepare you for, I'm not sure that you can necessarily, is the trauma, how deep that trauma can go, and the experience that you're going to feel with it. You know, every day you can go from one job where you've had a really positive interaction with a community member,
Yes.
which is pretty rare for police because we're not often called when things are going right,
Yeah.
to having to tell someone that their loved one had died. And
Yeah.
you might have actually seen the death or been present at the death, and they're not always
Yep.
a pleasant experience. You know, I've experienced it all, from having to handle dead children, unfortunately, and as a new mum, that
Yes.
I can't tell you how
Yes.
much more that now affects me, through to having a really positive experience by reuniting loved ones after a period of someone being missing and locating them, especially with some of the elder
Yeah.
community who've got dementia and Alzheimer's. So through that experience and putting that all together, dealing with my own trauma, seeing other people go through
Yes.
trauma, seeing other police officers try and deal with their trauma, it really did get me thinking that there's got to be a better way of managing this.
Absolutely.
So and there's such a huge emphasis on managing our physical health at the moment, and um,
Yes.
that industry is booming. You know, you got your fitness trackers,
Yes.
you've got all the apps, all the programs, all the trainers, all the
Yes.
information, and there's less stigma around it. So it's so much easier to manage
Definitely.
physical health, not just for police officers, not just for your frontline workers who are at the cold face of things going wrong, but for everybody, because it's contextual. You know, just
Agreed.
the trauma I go through is in the context of what I experience every day. It's no better, it's no greater than somebody else who isn't in emergency services, who's encountered probably the most traumatic thing for them. Is it's all in the
I was
context
going
of
to say, Bryony, I've got 35 years in nursing. And so when we did our nursing, I was but, 17 when I started nursing. And so at that age, the first time you experience a dead body or have to sit with a person who's passing, or you see one of those horrendous accidents, those images stay with you. So that's a long time ago for me. And I can still picture those moments clearly in my head. So I know how important this app is for all of those services and anyone that has to deal with something that might trigger or bring up a painful memory. And we don't talk about how that affects our psyche. We have all the knowledge, we have all the understanding, we have the logistics and legal around what we do, but no one talks about what happens in our brain when we try and go to sleep at night, or when you can't sleep because that image of that tragic accident remains with you for 24 hours and then reoccurs whenever it's tipped off in your brain. So, Bryony, the app that you've developed is called Frank, and I just wondered if I can hand over to, I'll get you to explain actually first why you went from an idea in your head to the development of Frank. And then I want to pop over to Dave and ask about being in that development and part of that development. So to you first, Bryony.
Absolutely. It all started a while ago, back in 2016, when I was doing some of my
Hmm.
advanced policing studies. And at the time, I was doing a crime reduction assignment, and part of it was come up with a unique crime prevention strategy. And the best way to get people
Yes.
to not commit crime is to have
Yep.
better life outcomes. So it starts in childhood development. So using what I'd already learnt from
Absolutely.
the general theory of crime, social learning theories, and some of the findings out of the Dunedin longitudinal multidisciplinary study in New Zealand,
Yes.
and other studies like it, is if you really focus on children's development and setting them in the right path and developing self-control and coping mechanisms, they're going to have better outcomes in adulthood. So that's already one way of preventing crime, because people who have got good outcomes
Absolutely.
at crime generally, there are exceptions, and obviously there's heat of the moment circumstances, but generally
Yes.
that's, you can reduce a lot of crime through that. So it comes back to me for well-being. So from there we built a prototype for that, and based more
Yes.
around towards children, and then we were testing the prototype on ourselves, and my PTSD was really bad at the time, and that's when we discovered it actually had a
Oh,
more broader application, because I thought I was really good at
yeah.
picking up changes in myself leading up to a
Yes.
PTSD related episode.
PTSD. Hmm.
this detected something a lot sooner than what I was consciously aware. So when I was able to apply, I found that
Wow.
change my outcomes and avoid having episodes. So that's sort of in a really quick nutshell of how
Yeah.
we got from how I was feeling and these thoughts that I had
Yes.
to developing a bit of a product out of it. So
Yeah.
it really
Yeah.
is targeted on pushing people towards more positive outcomes for themselves. And
Yes.
it's not about letting people do these things in private either. It's just about
Yep.
people who would not necessarily go out and get that assistance because the stigma involved, or for
Yeah.
frontline service workers, the big fear is always, how's this going
Yes.
to affect my employment? Am I going to lose my job?
Exactly.
So it's
Exactly.
it's all around helping those people and getting access to those first steps. But it's not just for when things are going wrong. It's so important to, you know,
Yes.
if to use the physical analogy again, if you can run a marathon, that's great. But unless you keep training, in 6 months' time, you're not going to
Uh-huh.
be able to run a marathon anymore. So it's about, it's
Yeah.
not just about when things go bad. It's about managing
It's
when things
about
are going great
correct.
and keeping that
Yeah.
condition.
Yeah. I'm listening to you, and I'm so excited that someone has actually taken the time and effort to do this. So, Dave, I want to talk about your involvement with the development of Frank, and then we'll get into some nuts and bolts about what it is and how we use it. So, over to you, Dave.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Toni. So I started working with Svelte about 2 years ago, and it was primarily to come work on this project because Svelte at that particular time is a digital agency, and they're working with a lot of different organizations, and they decided they wanted to start making a really meaningful impact in the world. And
Yeah.
Briony and Ben then approached Danny and Joey, who are the other co-founders on HCI and also in Svelte, to work on this project, and they were immediately drawn to how powerful and how amazing something like this could be if we could actually make a difference in the lives of people.
Yeah.
And I'd known Danny and Joey for many, many years, and they knew my background, and I had just come back to Australia, and they said, hey, we're working on this project. We could really do with somebody of your skill set to kind of come in and help us push it forward. So that's kind of how it all started. And it's been a real pleasure to work with Briony and Danny and Joey and Ben on this project, because there is so much possibility to be able to help people around the world. Mental health is an increasing problem all over the world.
Yes.
And you throw in COVID into this situation as well, the problems getting amplified even further. There are a lot of people who are struggling in the world. So getting the opportunity to work on a project like this to make a difference in the world, but also to be able to build something that's cool, was very appealing to me.
Yes. Yeah. Dave, I'm actually really fascinated. So there's the concept around an app, but then somewhere along the line, you decide to incorporate AI or artificial intelligence in the development of the app. How did that process work?
Well, it's not an easy process because AI is a bit of a black box. Often with, AI is a very general term, right? The probably more specific term is machine learning. So how do machines learn?
Yes.
And it's a bit of a black box in that even the smartest people in the world often don't know how the machines are making the decisions that they make. So it's a very experimental field, but you have to work with a lot of data. And then you apply algorithms to that data to come up with a model. And then once you've got a model, then you can start working with that to interpret, everyday data. And with regard to Frank, the method that we've actually come up with to interpret somebody's cognitive mood state is absolutely novel. We haven't been able to find anybody else in the world that's doing anything like this. And I won't go into too much detail because that's kind of our secret sauce. But it's a process that requires a lot of iteration and a lot of testing until you come up with a model that actually works. And that's kind of what we're in the process of doing right now, which I'm sure we'll touch on a bit later. But we're kind of testing. We're in pilot phase at the moment to test our technology to see how effective it is. Does it actually do the things that we believe it does? Because so far our evidence has been anecdotal. And what we're really trying to do at HCI is separate Frank from all of the other mental health apps out there. Well, maybe not all of them, but there's a lot of research to show that more than 95% of mental health apps don't actually provide any supporting evidence to show that they're effective. And at HCI, we believe, what's the point of building a mental health app and making a bucket load of money if you're not actually helping someone in the process? So we're really trying to separate ourselves from the rest of the pack in that manner by piloting this and making sure that our technology actually does the work the way that we believe it does.
Briony, I'm going to ask you now. I know this question I had later on in the program, but I just I want people to understand what Frank is and how you come up with the name Frank.
Okay. Firstly, we'll go with the name because that's the easy one. Names are always hard to come up with when you're developing anything. It was probably one of the hardest decisions you have to make. And it just came back to having a frank conversation with yourself. That's what the name Frank. So it's it's just being frank with yourself, having that frank conversation about how you're going and how you're feeling, and that perhaps you might need a bit of a hand up, and to help pull yourself back together again. But to answer the rest of the question, it basically works similar to like a fitness tracker. So it's sort of going around what you can measure, you can change because it's something tangible. And when you're talking around fitness, I use a fitness tracker and I have done for years. And particularly after just having a baby, I found it invaluable. My fitness tracker actually broke and I didn't have one. I went out and bought one because I need to get myself back in shape again and feeling healthy and good about myself. And with the fitness tracker, it's even before I didn't have one in that short time period, it was really hard to hold myself accountable to do the activity that was required for me to reach my goal at a physical level. So wellbeing's kind of the same. There's nothing around really without doing a lot of user input yourself that captures how you're feeling and shows it to you in a tangible way that you can measure and use as a starting point for self-improvement. A lot of the wellbeing apps that are around the place, and I certainly don't want to talk negatively about what's on the market because I think anyone who's having a go at this is good on them. They're absolutely going in with the right intentions, and I think that's fantastic, and there should be more of it. But for me, a lot of those apps were heavy journaling, and they didn't quite work for me because I'm not a journaler. So this works more in your subconscious. It takes what you're normally inputting into your device, and from that, using the machine learning algorithms, it gives you feedback into yourself, into your emotions. And from that, it's tangible, you can see it. And from there, you can start using it as a basis to improve yourself, improve your performance. It's the analogy we keep using for people is it's like a fitness tracker, but for your emotional well-being and for your mental well-being.
And so, sorry, Briony.
No, you go ahead.
I've got so many questions. So it will be like any other app that you can have on your iPhone, your laptop, your iPad. Is that my understanding?
We're pretty much just at the moment, our first market release when we get there is going to be purely on your mobile device. Obviously laptops, because people use laptops and PCs in a little bit of a different manner. There is capacity to do that, but that's further down the track for us. At this stage, it's just through mobiles because that's the medium that most people do their communications through. So it will work across all your platforms, from your emails to Facebook. If you're doing something confidential, there's the ability to turn it off because I know that privacy, and especially with my background being policing, privacy is such a huge.
I was going to say my next question is around privacy and how Frank will protect people's privacy whilst they're using the app.
Because our insights are derived from people's natural language use. So when you're talking around their natural language use, I mean, I know when I'm using my banking app, I
Yep.
would turn it off, because, and even though I know the product and I know it's safe enough to do it, it's just an added safeguard essentially. But
Yeah.
you know, that information is not really going to have any impact on the emotional
No.
feedback that we get through the app. But so the user's got the ability to turn it on and off. So that's and it's one of the ways that we're trying to empower our users, is that they do have the ability to turn it on and off. That's really important, I believe, and it enhances that confidence in the integrity and the security of the product. So even though we know we're building it as safe as we can, there's confidence knowing that you can switch it off if you are doing something that is highly confidential.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
You go, Briony.
I was just going to say that's one aspect.
Can I just chime in there as well?
Yes, go, Dave.
Yeah, on the privacy element, you know, as Briony mentioned, privacy has been a really important part of our approach to building out this application. So what we started doing very early on is implementing what's called privacy by design. And privacy by design is a method by which you only take the data that's relevant for the use of the user, right? And you also, the approach you need to take is like of, you know, removing data from your data systems once it's no longer valid, for example, you know, because there are plenty of examples of people who have handed over data, and it could have been 10 years ago, to some organization. Maybe they gave their email address and their address as well, and their name, maybe their birthday too. And within, you know, 10 years time, you've forgotten that you even dealt with this company, but there are privacy leaks happening all over the place. So implementing a method like privacy by design is a way to protect users by only keeping the data that's actually relevant and getting rid of everything that's not.
And the app, FRANKapp, will do that, won't it, Dave? That's my understanding. You've designed it so that it will use the information to help the person in that moment, essentially, or that time, and then it's gone.
Right. And because what we do, because one of the really powerful things about Frank is that you could keep using your keyboard on your smart device for months on end. And if you didn't go back into the Frank application, that's fine, because your data is still going to be there, right? But what we do over time is aggregate that data. So we get rid of, eventually we get rid of all of the text that you've put into your keyboard, and we delete that. So we no longer have that, but we still have the emotional content surrounding what that text was actually communicating. So these are the kind of methods that we're using to be able to protect users on a long-term basis, because it's pretty fundamental in how we've approached everything.
And it is the emotional stuff that's why the app is there. That's the brilliance behind the app. And you don't actually need the rest of the stuff, so there's no need to keep it, which is really encouraging for anyone who wants to use Frank. Briony, I'm going to go back to you. What sort of, we're talking about individuals here, but I know that Frank has scope for organisations as well. What do you see as some of the advantages for an organisation to promote the use of the Frank app within their organisation?
Right. So I'll go back and start with the individual. So one of the side effects, or one of the byproducts we noticed was we get, with the individuals using our FRANKapp, is we get really tremendous statistical data that gives a snapshot of well-being of a cohort, and that's really powerful. And that's part of our social impact. Is
absolutely
that depersonalized statistical data. So we're not talking about people's individual privacy. We're talking about the statistical data only. That's depersonalized. We're going to plug that back into research. So that's our social impact factor, to improve research in this space and really draw and really make well-being and mental health be on the agenda, and really try and have that positive impact on the community, the global community, hopefully. So obviously from that, when you're looking at the broad picture there, you can also break it down to organisations as well. So as soon as we've got a certain number of individuals who are using the app and they're under an organisation, that organisation can then subscribe to get those insights. So that's really powerful for an organisation, because you can actually start to see the impact that different things are having on your organisation. Like COVID-19 is extremely topical at the moment. You can have a look and
Absolutely.
see how that's impacting your workforce, how it's impacting performance. You know, is
Yeah,
it hurting your competitive advantage? So with the
absolutely.
organisations, we're actually aiming to facilitate reduced absenteeism and presenteeism. So presenteeism is where the employees are showing up to work, but they're not necessarily being
Yes.
productive. They're absent. Improved organisational loyalty, because it's shown that investments in your employees improves your employee loyalty, and we all
They
know that.
do. Hmm.
Yeah, and terrific employees are hard to find, and you want to keep them.
And they're
So
gold. And organizations need to know that this particular staff member is purely engaged today, and they should be looked after because they're one of the biggest resources an organization has. If you don't look after your people, take care of them, you don't have much of an organization, do you, Briony?
no, exactly. And look, the World Health Organization have done a lot of research into this as well, and they've found there's a 4-to-1 positive return on investment for wellbeing for individuals in organizations that
That's
invest in
cool.
wellbeing programs for their employees. So, and that's huge. It's massive. And I know from personal experience, like when you have, and policing is probably the extreme end of this. When you see people who aren't coping well, you do see that performance
Yes.
deteriorating. And
Deteriorate.
yeah, and some of these, and I'm without
They
getting
don't
too,
always know about it though, as
yeah,
well, do they, Bronnie? Like sometimes you are not aware that you are not performing at an optimal level because of all the stuff that's going on inside of your brain and the way that you're trying to cope, and you may not be aware, and that is not
absolutely.
actually your fault
I think
either.
I think we're the worst persons to judge ourselves, because I think we're either too cruel or we're too close to ourselves to be able to see it with some
Definitely.
level of objectivity. And sometimes it needs to come
Yeah.
from something outside, but it can be really hurtful when it comes from other people. So something like Frank, where it's, you know, it's a machine that's telling you it's not a person. It can't, you know, it's less. I think anyway, people will find it less hurtful coming from it. It's not
Yes.
judgmental, and it's your own voice being reflected back to you. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's received a lot better than what it would be if it was coming from someone else. At least I know that's how I would feel for myself.
I completely agree with you, Bronnie. A device or an app explaining to me, well, you're not quite performing at your optimum best, and this is what I suggest you do, or how you work towards improving that from something that's inanimate. That's fantastic because there's no judgment. It's just a simple, statement of what's going on with you. Dave, I'm going to go back to you now with this question. How will the app measure its success?
Well, that's a really good question. I guess success for Frank is probably largely to do with engagement, right? Because
Yep.
with Frank, what we're providing to users is first a reflection of what we're detecting in their cognitive mood state, right? But
Yes.
by the nature of the method that we're using to obtain the information through the application, we're also going to be able to provide users with very specific and personalized insights that are relevant to them.
Yeah.
So let's say that something's not going well at work for somebody at that particular time, and they're using Frank and they're communicating the difficulties that they're having through their phone. We're going to be able to detect that work is a problem area for that individual at the moment, and that there's maybe elevated levels of sadness or fear or anger or something of that nature. So we're going to be able to provide really specific insights to the user, and then beyond that, one of the really powerful things I think about what we're doing is it's not just a matter of us detecting what's going on in the life of the user. We also want to help them get better, right? So when we detect elevated levels of anger or sadness or fear, disgust or any kind of cognitive disorder, we then nudge the user towards constructive behaviors that improve their mental health, right? So there's a whole range of things that we can nudge the user towards that are clinically proven to make a difference. And they could include better exercise regimes, better sleep habits, social support, counseling. There's a whole range. We've essentially got I think it's a 14 by 61 matrix where we can pick up certain cues from the user, and then we kind of hone in on the specific thing that's going to be really valuable to them. And we can also start to learn to what works for the user, because not everybody's going to want to do meditation, or not everybody's going to want to go exercise every day. So we can really focus in on what works for the user and nudge the user towards those behaviors. And then as they take those behaviors, we should start to see an increase in their mental well-being, right? So I guess, when we're thinking about success, it's really about creating better outcomes for the end user. If their mental well-being is showing to improve through taking actions based on the nudges that we're providing them, then that's absolutely successful for us, I think.
Dave, will those nudges be delivered via a notification, an email? How do you envision, how will Frank do that?
Yeah, it'll be through notifications on your phone, right? So Frank let's say Frank detects elevated levels of anger over the last few days, combined with a few other elements that we might pick up. We might go, okay, do you know what? We're detecting all of this, and we know that Tuesdays are typically a really difficult day for you, given your history that we've been able to measure. And so we'll send a notification to the user, why don't you try some exercise in the morning, or a morning meditation, which Frank will be able to provide to you to be able to participate in. And then they can take that action, and then we can measure that result. So essentially what we're getting is, there's some data input. Frank does some analysis. We provide some insights, and then we nudge the user towards a constructive action. The user takes that action, and then the cycle starts again. And so we essentially what we feel like we're doing, and I don't think there's too many mental health apps out there that can do this, but we're closing the loop on mental health, right? We're closing the loop because we get this cycle, and there's this constant cycle, and the objective is to produce better outcomes. And if we're producing those for the user,
I'm immediately thinking of a policing/nursing scenario where you have a particularly aggressive person, and if they begin to use that app, that aggression is being helped being satiated before it gets to the point where you have a bad outcome. They shoot someone, or they punch someone, or this is just completely exciting from my perspective to hear that we have this technology available. I'm thinking about sufferers of depression and anxiety, where it will be able to pick up those anxiety cues often long time before. From my perspective as an anxiety sufferer, it's taken me decades to pick up my own cues and manage them so that the anxiety doesn't get out of control. If you had machine learning and an app that would help me do that, oh my God, what a blessing that would be. I'm just getting completely into this whole idea, Briony. I want to talk about some of the achievements that Frank has made so far, because I think that they're pretty exciting.
It is. I mean, it's been a lot of hard years in the making to get us to this point. Obviously, as you can see from our discussion, what we're doing is pretty sophisticated. So it's taken time, and we've been really responsible with wanting to make sure it's right. But back in 2016, 2017, we were a top 10 startup in Mass Challenge Australia, which was the bridge to Mass Challenge, the global incubator. And we actually came in the top 300 out of 2,500 global startups that year. And that was really early for us. So that was a huge confidence booster for us. More recently, though, in 2019, we got accepted into Stone and Chalk as a resident, which is part of Adelaide's Lot 14 incubation hub. innovation hub, sorry. And
yes.
obviously in the early days, we partnered with Svelte Ventures, which is the South Australian agency. All our current shareholders are South Australian based or ex-South Australians. We also—
That's very cool.
Thank you. We're actually an organisation of choice for CMU, Cardigan Mellon University, which Dave can talk more about that relationship because he deals with them directly.
Yeah.
So for their internship program, we've been an organisation of choice, and all the feedback from all the interns going back to the university is they've really enjoyed their experience working on this project. And some of which have stayed on, which has been fantastic for us. We're
Definitely
also starting our first pilot at the moment as well, which is hugely exciting for us. It's just it's another massive milestone for us, and that's being run independently, which was also really important for us because I think it adds that level of credibility, and we're going to hold what we need to hear rather than what someone thinks we want to hear as well, to make sure that this product is what it needs to be.
Important.
Yeah. And that's being headed up by Dr. Miranda Van Hoof. So she's the Executive Director of the Military and Emergency Services Health Australia, MISHA. They're formerly known as the Road Home. So it's a really credible organisation. They're doing massive work in this space. And we've started securing some of our foundation and pilot organisation customers. So Police Health, which is a not-for-profit member health insurer, they've come on board. The South Australian Department of Treasury and Finance is our first government customer. We're in the final stages of negotiation with them, but it's pretty well done and dusted. It's just the final bit of ink on the paper that we're going through at the moment with them. Scotch College, which is a premier South Australian private school, they've been with us from the start. We actually used them for a lot of our focus groups when we were looking at a more child perspective angle to start off with. So that'll be one of our first schools that are on board, which is fantastic. We're so excited to work for them, work with them.
Oh, definitely.
We're also having negotiations with Gallagher Bassett, who are looking at, they're a third-party administrative organisation. So they are looking at for themselves, but they're also looking at potentially for their customer organisations and acting as a bit of a retailer for us. So we're really excited about those relationships. The people that have helped us along the way, I put into that milestone category as well. With our interim advisory board chair, Chessa, is the former SA Minister for Disability, Mental Health and Substance Abuse. And we periodically get advice from Professor Alexander or Sandy McFarlane, who is really well known in the field, and Dr. Paula Dapovich, who is also very well known in that field as well. From the business mentoring aspect, with Raymond Spencer, who's quite a well-known South Australian entrepreneur. He's given us a lot of business advice and mentoring, along with David Knox and Glenn Rosie, who's actually added a bit of a technical aspect as well. So we keep going through our checklist.
Congratulations,
Steve.
Thank you.
Dave, I'm going to briefly go back to you just quickly. The Carnegie Mellon University internship program that's focused on machine learning, how beneficial has that been for the Frank and its development?
Beyond words. It's been an amazing way to help a student these are master's students, right? So it's a way for them to kind of take a step into the corporate world to understand how business works and work in an employment environment in the field that they've chosen. But from our side, it's also been incredibly valuable because in a way, not only do we get a very smart student, because Carnegie Mellon students are typically top notch, but we can bring somebody who's been studying and learning about the latest methodologies into the organization for a 3-month period. They can help bring knowledge to us in some of the cutting edge stuff that they've been learning about. But also, as Briony touched on, it's been a way for us to recruit good employees. So it's a way to try before you buy, in a sense, So it's been very valuable, and our relationships with the students that have come through have been fantastic, and we've got great reviews. That's kind of come back through the university to us from their experience in working on this project as well.
They
And
must be pretty excited to have had the opportunity to work with you guys around machine learning. Yeah.
They are. It's in a way, it's made Svelte and HCI the hot organization to work with at Carnegie Mellon Australia. So yeah, we've kind of built up a bit of a reputation there to be working on cutting edge projects, and we've got a cool environment with really nice people. So bringing them into that environment has created a real rapport with the university, and our relationship with them is fantastic now. So yeah, it's brilliant.
That's wonderful news, and it's wonderful to know that our Australian talent has an opportunity to be involved in something that's going to be worldwide technology, and they're at the forefront of it here in Australia. Really exciting stuff. Briony,
Absolutely.
I'm going to combine the next question kind of in two. So what's next for the team behind Frank, and how can people be involved in this project and the next testing phases of Frank?
yeah, not a problem. So at the moment we've just started our first pilot with a small group just to test the the pilot before the pilot, if that makes sense, to make sure the pilot will run
Yes, yes.
smoothly.
Yeah.
So as of next week, the pilot will be open for people to sign up to help us test it. So this is Frank in its very, very first pilot. And
Oh,
it's just to make
wow.
sure the keyboard's working properly. I can get Dave to talk more about it because he's actually heading it up.
Yes.
Make sure the keyboard's
I'll
working properly, make sure the
go to
machine learning
Dave.
properly, and make sure they're both working properly together. So there's a couple of different things happening in that pilot. So that's for individuals. So we do have a screening process. So I just want to make it clear to people, it's only for Australian residents
Yes.
at this point, and it's only for
Yes.
the Android users at the moment too. We'll have an Apple version coming out later on. But if you don't fit into that category, you can still register your interest by either liking our Facebook page, or if you go to if you're not
Yes.
on Facebook, go to the website. There is a section down the bottom where you can send us your details. It does say for investment or as an organisation, but individuals can lodge their interest on there as well. The other bit I wanted to say to that has just escaped my mind.
That's okay. We'll go back to we'll go back to Dave to talk about that next testing process. What does that look like, Dave?
Yeah, the piloting phase, as we touched on briefly, is a really important part in our process to deliver something that's valuable to people. So what we're undertaking is a 2-phase piloting process. And we're right now in, as Briony was saying, we're in the pilot before the pilot. So this is the pilot before the first pilot, essentially. We've been working with about 50 people to test our first pilot project. And in the next week or so, we're actually going to go live with our first phase of the pilot. And the purpose here is really just to test the technology. You know, we're really assessing whether the technology does what we think it does. And we believe that's probably going to go for about a month. We're looking for about 300 to 1,000 people to participate. And then once that's completed, as Briony touched on before, Mesha will be conducting the analysis on our results. So we'll get some independently verified third-party results. And then once we get through that process, we will start phase 2 of the pilot a bit later this year, in a few months' time, or maybe probably mid-year, I would imagine. And phase 2 is really about, you know, can we make a measurable difference in people's well-being through the use of the application, right? So the first phase is technology. The second phase is well-being.
Second phase is results. Yeah.
Right. Because we want to make sure that we can actually help people get better. So that's kind of the process that we're undertaking throughout 2021. The second phase is going to go for about 3 months. So that's going to take us to quite late in the year, and then we should get some again third-party independently verified results. And at that point, if all goes well, we're going to be ready to launch into the market.
Oh, how exciting. So in that second phase of testing, will you have both an Android and Apple version to go by that stage, do you think?
Yes, yeah, that's the plan. Absolutely. The first phase is just Android only, as Briony mentioned. But yeah, in
Yes.
the second phase, we're going to be ready to essentially, because that second phase product is our actual product. So yeah, that will be open
So it's
to
just
anybody
about
who's got
ready
an
for
iPhone.
market.
Correct. Yeah. So anybody who's got an iPhone, anybody who's got an Android phone is going to be able to participate in that. Or, you could just sign up and wait until we're ready to actually launch the project. But, we'd love to have lots and lots of people involved. The more people that we can have involved in the study and the research,
Definitely.
The more valuable and the more accurate our data is going to be as well.
And in the initial stages, you're using Australian participants, but eventually you'll open that up and it will be launched worldwide, won't it, Briony?
That's correct. And I remembered what I was going to say beforehand. Yes, the
Yes.
to go global, to globalize this, because we want to have the positive impact on the global community. It's not just about looking after ourselves, it's about looking after everybody where we can. With the pilot, for those who are Australian residents and do have Android and want to sign up, we do have a screening process, because obviously we're dealing with wellbeing, and to be responsible in the way that we do it, we do have a screening process set up. So and it is very, very conservative the way we've got it set up. So if you get rejected, not saying that you've got deep-seated mental health issues, it's our levels are very, very conservative, because to test this,
you need to test it.
We need a certain category of person, but
and you don't want to be causing. You don't want to be causing undue. Yes.
Yeah, we don't want undue duress.
Correct.
We don't want unrealistic expectations as well, because it hasn't been stringently clinically tested yet. This is what we're starting to do now, and the responsible way of doing that is to not let anyone who has an adverse level of risk participate. And we do want to help
because you're protecting people.
But at this stage, we need to protect you by not letting you be involved in this particular pilot. But please still sign up, because at some stage it will be open and available to you. It's just for this initial testing, we have to be responsible and do the right thing. Otherwise, what's the point of doing it? We're also looking at interest from organisations who would like to participate in our second phase pilot. They can register via the website or again by the Facebook page. We're more than happy to start those conversations, and the idea being our foundation customers, our pilot organisation customers will become our foundation customers. So there are some financial incentives involved with that as well. So if you're interested, please jump on board and register your interest with us.
For those of you that are listening live, Paleo will put those links and details into the chat box. If you're listening to this post-live show, jump onto radiotoni.com and look for our co-host, and you'll find all of the team's information there. But it's simply FRANKapp.ai, FRANKapp.ai. Pretty simple. And if you go there, you'll be able to look around and see what the team has done, what they're doing, sign up to be part of the pilot. You can also email the team, and their email address is hello@frankapp.ai. Again, very simple, hello@frankapp.ai, and they'll be able to help you with any of your questions. Just quickly, guys, what are you hoping for in the first pilot phase, and then what are you hoping to see, and what sort of results are you hoping for? What's your aspirations for both the first pilot and then the second pilot? I'll go to you first, Briony, and then I'll go to Dave.
So our aspirations for the first pilot is to prove a lot of our hypotheses, and Dave can talk a little bit more about that. But we really want the user feedback. Make sure it's as useful as what I believe that it is for people. I believe it's useful for me, so I'd like to think that it would therefore be useful for other people, but it's about validating that aspect of it. And it's about, for us, it's really about starting to establish that clinical credibility. It's the first step in that path. So we do have some results that we want out of phase one, but phase one is just that. It's phase one in a series of phases that we want to make this as stronger product as we possibly can, to help as many people at different levels of risk as what we possibly can.
And that's why you're doing the series of testing and the pilot phases, is because you want to know ahead of time before you release this amazing app that this is what we can genuinely expect it to do for people and in their lives. Yeah?
Yeah, exactly. We want to make the right promises and the accurate promises. We don't want to make pie in the sky promises, which is why
Yes.
this testing is so important to us. You know,
Yes.
when you're talking about this kind of venture, a lot rests on the integrity of it and the credibility of it, and that's absolutely crucial, which is
Yeah.
why we've got such a focus on privacy and why we've got such a focus on clinical testing. They're really, really
Yeah.
important to maintaining it. It's why we charge for the product too, because if it was free, we would have to make our
Definitely.
money somewhere else. And a lot of companies make their money by selling data, and that's not what we're
Yeah.
interested in. The data that we collect,
You're
that we
interested.
research, is exactly that: is to aid
Mm.
research. So the monetization has got to come from somewhere. As much as we are a social enterprise, we still have to pay our bills.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so the second phase pilot, what we're looking to achieve out of that is pretty much the same as the first, same in some degrees as the first phase pilot,
Yes.
but making it more from an organizational perspective, that it is useful for organizations, that they're going to get that benefit out of it. So that they,
Oh,
and the nice thing about
I can
organizations,
see it already.
if you improve a workplace, how much less stress is there on the individual going home at the end of the
I
day? So
know.
it's
I
a
know.
twofold
I
thing
know.
there.
I'm thinking of police, ambulance, nursing, but then it goes to, fireys and your team at the local council, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, into your sports teams and management of those. I just see unlimited potential. Dave, quickly from your perspective, what are you hoping to see in those pilot phases?
Yeah, okay. So first, we really want to prove out the technology. We're really testing in the first phase, does it do what we believe it does?
Yeah.
And it really does have a technical focus in that component of it, because we want to make sure that when we are interpreting people's mood, that we're actually doing it in a meaningful and accurate way.
Yeah.
And then the second phase
Essentially,
is really,
sorry,
sorry, go
Dave.
ahead.
Essentially, you want people to try and find all the kinks. You want to essentially try and break it so that you know that it's not going to break when you go into the final product.
Yeah, I mean, we're essentially looking for a correlation or a causation in our
Mm-hmm.
hypothesis, right?
Uh-huh.
So,
Mm-hmm.
we're testing, does that hypothesis, is that true, that hypothesis? And if it's
Yes.
not to the level that we're hoping, obviously we're going to have to go back to the drawing board a little bit. We might have to modify the algorithm somewhat, and we may have to run a phase 1 pilot again. But hopefully we don't need to do that. I feel like that's probably not going to be the case given the data that we're seeing so far, but we obviously need to prove that and verify it independently. And then the second phase, like when doctors graduate, they take the Hippocratic Oath, right? And
Yes.
in the Hippocratic Oath is first, do no harm. And that's what we're about. We don't want to do harm. We want to help people.
Yes.
So we're really proving if whether we can actually make a measurable difference in people's well-being or not. And then the flow-on effects for that, as Briony was touching on with the organizations, is, well, if we can make a set of employees happier and healthier and more productive at work, what are the flow-on effects for that for organizations?
Yes.
Because one thing we haven't
Yeah.
really spoken about is the organizational dashboard that we're going to provide to organizations with aggregated and anonymized data to show them the cognitive state of all of the employees as a whole in their organization, which will enable them to make more strategic decisions about how to move forward. They'll be able to measure the consequences of policy implementation. They'll be able to measure the effects of things like COVID and whatnot. There are so many potential benefits to be able to help an individual and an organization. And that's really what we're really hoping to find out in phase 2.
And just to
Fantastic.
from what Dave was saying with the organisation, I just want to highlight as well, the organisations will never receive the results of one individual, because it opens up the door potentially for
Definitely.
favourable treatment or biased treatment. I've myself been through a workplace bullying incident that I wouldn't
Yes.
on anybody. So I wouldn't want my wellbeing information given to the person who bullied me in the workplace. So that's like aggregated data. It's not individuals, and if there's not enough
de-identified and they can't identify who said what. Yeah,
absolutely.
And we
listen,
need,
guys.
Sorry,
guys. I was just going to say we are. I could talk about this all day. I'm so excited that I got to speak to both of you today. I would really like to have you back on the program through the series of pilots, and as it goes along. I encourage people to jump on and connect with the team at FRANKapp.ai. It has been an absolute delight and a wonderful pleasure to get to speak to you both today on the show. I look forward to having you back again at some stage and at the various trial levels. That would be amazing, and particularly before you get to that all-important launch date. Thank you so much for being on Radio Toni Everyday Business and telling our listeners about the wonderful innovations that are coming out of Australia at the moment. Briony, Dave, thank you so much. I have to let us go and get us live off air. I will talk to you again soon. Thank you everyone for listening today. Don't forget to jump onto radiotoni.com if you want further information about the Frank app, or reach out to the team at FRANKapp.ai. And that's our lot for this week. Thank you so much, and bye for now. Over to you, TJ.
Thank you for watching and listening to Toni TV. For more inspirational stories, join us next week. Bye for now.